Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Abdul Kar, continuing with the lecture series for first term MBBS Part 2. In last lecture, we have discussed varicose veins, varicose ulcer, venous ulcer. Now today we will discuss important topic, that is venous thromboembolism, VTE. Now this VTE more commonly seen as a complication of either prolonged surgery, major surgery, or major illness. More important, it leads to impairment of quality of life and always carries a risk of mortality due to sudden pulmonary embolism, now which is a direct cause of death in surgical practice, in surgical patient. For that reason, we have to assess the risk of VT actively, and at any cost we have to prevent or reduce the risk of extension of thrombus and embolic phenomena. So today's objective of learning to study the various factors responsible for VTE, risk factor, management and prevention of venous thromboembolism. Now thrombosis, as you know, it is a semi-solid coagulum, or we call it as a clot in vein, which is formed due to aggregation of platelets embedded in the mesh formed due to fibrin and RBCs. Now this VT can be superficial thrombophlebitis involving superficial veins. If it involves deep vein, we call it as a deep vein thrombosis or DVT. Again, the DVT leads to pulmonary embolism or post-thrombotic syndrome, which is responsible for venous hypertension and venous insufficiency, which we have already discussed in varicose vein. Now, how it occurs? It can be explained very well by Virchow's triad. The first factor, that is the endothelial damage. Now, this endothelial damage initiates the aggregation of platelets, which comes in contact at the damaged endothelium, causing aggregation and thrombus formation. The second factor is abnormal flow or stasis, slowing of the blood flow, which occurs in, for example, congestive cardiac failure, post-operative immobilization, ischemia. The endothelial damage can occur due to trauma or any disease process. Third factor in Virchow's triad, that is the abnormal blood or coagulability, means defect in the coagulation. For example, it can be due to antithrombin factor deficiency, thrombophilia. So any coagulopathy can give rise to coagulation and development of thrombus. So that is the Virchow's triad, which explains the development of thrombosis in vein. Now, what are the risk factors involved in development of DVT or venous thromboembolism? As the age increases, the coagulability increases. In older patients, there are more chances. Obesity, that is associated with hyperlipidemia, cholesterolemia, plaque formation, more risk of thrombosis formation. Varicose vein, we already discussed. Varicose vein is associated with superficial thrombophlebitis that can extend to deep vein, or deep vein thrombosis can cause superficial varicosities. So that is two way. Immobility, prolonged immobility, previous history of DVT, these are the risk factor. Immobility is more commonly seen in patient admitted for major surgery, major trauma surgery, pelvic surgeries. Then pregnancy, the pressure over the pelvic vein due to gravid uterus in first trimester also, in pelvic brim, or in case of third trimester, it is a gravid uterus, full term uterus compressing the pelvic vein. And secondly, the hormonal causes estrogen progesterone effect. Puerperium, puerperal sepsis, these are also risk factor for development of DVT. Then other factors mostly related with congenital diseases, that is thrombophilia, which is seen in younger patient, congenital deficiency of antithrombin 3, protein CS, factor 6, dysfibrinogenemia, then congenital or acquired anti-phospholipid antibody, lupus anticoagulant. So these are the rare conditions but can occur in young patient. Now other factors we commonly see, surgical factors or disease factors. Most common, that is a trauma, then major surgery, prolonged surgery, malignancies, for example, malignancy of stomach or pancreas, cardiac causes, cardiac failure, recent myocardial infarction, paralysis which leads to immobilization, bedridden patient, then infection, IBS, nephrotic syndrome, polycythemia, prolonged journey will give rise to stasis in sitting, particularly in sitting position. The thrombus can develop in calf muscle, soleus muscle. Then the other condition, that is known as e-thrombosis. Prolonged sitting in persons who are using computer, working on computer for a prolonged period, so they are more prone for developing thrombosis in leg. So that is termed as e-thrombosis. The persons working with the computer and net, so that is called as e-thrombosis. We must be aware of this entity. Now all these factors we have seen, they are responsible for platelet aggregation, which leads to thrombosis. So triggering of platelet aggregation causes thrombus formation, then it forms a fibrin mesh along with the RBCs, and there is a propagation of thrombus into large vein, there is a breaking of clot. Once the thrombus is loose and circulated in the venous system, it is called as embolism. This embolism can lodge in the pulmonary vessels, causing pulmonary embolism, which causes sudden collapse and death of patient. Sometimes there can be partial thrombosis of pulmonary veins, causing pulmonary hypertension or pulmonary infarct, or this DVT in the leg can get recanalized, and that can result into a chronic course which is called as post-thrombotic syndrome, that ultimately leads to venous hypertension and venous insufficiency, venous ulcer, which we already discussed. So that is the pathology in short, triggering of platelet aggregation and formation of thrombus and ultimately embolism, leading to pulmonary embolism. Now this thromboembolism can occur in superficial veins or it can occur into deep venous system. So we will come to the superficial thrombophlebitis. So there are various causes. For example, trauma. These veins, they are superficial. So trauma is more commonly common factor to involve in the thrombophlebitis of superficial veins. Then common factor, that is venipuncture. We use a venous cannula or intracath by doing venipuncture. If we keep these cannulas for longer period, it can cause inflammation of veins, superficial veins, or infection of vein leading to thrombophlebitis. That is the commonest cause seen in ward. Then infusion of hyperosmolar solutions or drugs. The solutions like 25% dextrose or any toxic drugs, particularly chemotherapeutic drugs, if not diluted properly or not administered properly, they can cause thrombophlebitis of superficial veins. Then visceral malignancy, as I already told, that is carcinoma of stomach or carcinoma of pancreas, can give rise to superficial thrombophlebitis, or it can be associated with superficial thrombophlebitis. Then TAO, that is Berger disease, it is also associated with migrating superficial thrombophlebitis. Then coagulopathy or coagulation disorders, that can be associated with superficial thrombophlebitis. So main factor, that is the abnormal endothelium, which precipitate the aggregation of platelet. Then trauma, particularly in varicose vein. Then coagulopathy like polycythemia, thrombocytosis, sickle cell disease, that can be associated with superficial thrombophlebitis. Clinically, we can find this superficial thrombus vein like a solid, tender, cord-like veins. There is erythema of skin. Now, sometimes the superficial thrombophlebitis can extend to deeper vein, resulting into deep vein thrombosis. Now, this infection, if it supervenes, then it causes suppuration, leading to abscess formation, which requires incision and drainage. Now, investigations to be done in superficial thrombophlebitis: routine hemogram, coagulation profile. Duplex scan is required if we suspect the extension of superficial thrombophlebitis to deeper vein. So we have to rule out deep vein thrombosis. Then we have to rule out any malignancy like CA stomach or CA pancreas. Then CT endoscopy will also help to rule out other conditions. The treatment of the superficial thrombophlebitis is mostly simple. We can prescribe NSAID, painkiller, anti-inflammatory. Then topical heparinoid preparations, thrombophobe, like thrombophobe. If it is infected, then excision of infected veins or IND for incision and drainage for abscess. These veins get spontaneously resolved with the conservative treatment. The mostly we require the rest to the part, elevation of limb and bandaging. So to prevent the extension to deep vein, we can use a pressure bandage, compression bandage. That is very important. So rest, elevation of limb and bandaging will be sufficient to treat this superficial thrombophlebitis. Coming to the important one, that is deep vein thrombosis or DVT. It is also called as phlebothrombosis. Now this is more commonly seen in lower limb, which starts in or begins in soleus vein in the lower limb. It is rare in upper limb, for example, axillary vein thrombosis, which can be caused due to prolonged use of upper arm with raised arm, particularly in painter or some using it for preparing signboards. There is a high tendency to dislodge the thrombosis, resulting into pulmonary embolism, pulmonary infarction, or post-thrombosis syndrome. Now, this deep vein thrombosis is a major cause of sudden death due to pulmonary embolism. Now, what are the risk factors involved that can be tabulated as per the Wales criteria? We will see that in the next slide. Now, clinical features presenting with the DVT most of the time patients are asymptomatic, nearly two-thirds patient asymptomatic without any symptom. Fever is an early sign, low-grade pyrexia that is more commonly seen in recurrent pulmonary embolism. Then dilated superficial veins as the blood is diverted through the superficial venous system due to blockage of deeper venous system. The venous returns occur by superficial veins. So particularly it is seen if there is a established uh, deep vein thrombosis, if there is a wall incompetency, you can see the dilated superficial vein and ultimately that causes the varicose vein. The pain in the calf region, swelling, shiny skin, stress skin, tenderness, edema in the calf or raised temperature, stiff calf can be seen in the leg. That the condition can be bilateral in 30% cases. Now clinically we can demonstrate with the positive Homan signs, that is forceful dorsiflexion in extended knee causes resistant to forceful dorsiflexion and pain. Moses sign, that is gentle squeezing in the calf muscle causes pain, tenderness. Neoff sign, that is deep tenderness along the line of popliteal vein in popliteal fossa. Linton test is done by applying tourniquet. Patient is asked at the saphenofemoral junction. Patient is asked to walk, and then without removing tourniquet, the leg is elevated, and we find that there are visible dilated veins which don't get emptied. So that is suggestive of presence of DVT. Now these are the clinical signs. Sometimes are seen in patient, or sometimes the patient may not present with signs of DVT, or patient can directly present with the signs of pulmonary embolism. So in that case one must suspect the presence of DVT. Now the calf tenderness, which is present in 75% cases, and this pain which is present in calf region not necessarily correlate with the size, location, extent of thrombosis. Only in 10% of confirmed DVT patient you will find that proper clinical symptoms and signs. Hence it is important that one should suspect the DVT in high risk group, as many times the patient presents with signs and symptoms of pulmonary embolism directly. So that is why we must rule out the DVT in limb at earliest possible. Now this DVT is common in lower leg, lower limb. DVT of femoral vein causes painful congestion and edema of leg with lymphangitis. When it is extensive thrombus, it causes a white leg, that is known as phlegmasia alba dolens. The extensive DVT of iliac vein, pelvic vein results into cellulitic limb, venous gangrene, the leg becomes blue. This condition is known as phlegmasia caeruleus dolens. So these are the two major conditions which are life-threatening if the DVT is severe. If it is partial or it runs a chronic case, then it results into post-thrombotic limb syndrome, PTS, which ultimately leads to venous insufficiency and venous hypertension. Now many times patient will present directly with the pulmonary embolism. So patient will have sudden development of tachycardia. Initially patient may be having normal pulse, or patient may be looking normal, but sudden development of tachycardia, pain in chest, sudden respiratory distress, respiratory failure, patient go into collapse and ultimately death occur. So that can happen with the massive pulmonary embolism. Patient can present with cyanosis, dyspnea, low-grade pyrexia. If it is a repeated pulmonary embolism or recurrent embolism, we can see the neck valve fullness, pleural rub will be there, then fixed split second heart sound will be audible, and in partial thrombosis, it can lead to pulmonary infarction, so we can get features of pulmonary infarction and ultimately the features of pulmonary hypertension, which can be diagnosed with a specialized investigation. Now this scoring is called as modified Wells criteria. It is for DVT prediction and another is for pulmonary embolism prediction. So now this is a modified Wells criteria for DVT prediction. There is a scoring system for trauma. There is a score 1, bedridden patient, more than 3 days, 1, tenderness in calf, popliteal femoral 1, swelling whole limb 1, calf circumference 1 score, pitting edema 1 score, dilated superficial vein 1, previous history of DVT, that is scored 1, malignancy history 1, IV drug abuse 3, differential diagnosis other than DVT, the score is -2. So it is calculated from this chart by adding all the score. If it is -2 to 0, it is a low prediction of DVT. If the score is 1 to 2, it is moderate prediction. If the score is 3 to high, there is a high chances of development of DVT. Now this score is a only guide for the assessment. So that is not hard and fast, but it can guide us to the predicting the development of DVT. Now this is another modified Wells criteria for pulmonary embolism prediction. Again, similar scoring system, clinical signs symptoms score is 3, differential diagnosis other than pulmonary embolism score is 3, heart rate more than 100 1.5, immobilization 1.5, previous DVT 1.5, hemoptysis if present the score is 1, history of malignancy, treatment in within 6 months that is 1, and the score more than 4 is suggestive of pulmonary embolism prediction. If it is less than 4, the pulmonary embolism development is less likely or unlikely. Again, this is a guide for assessing the pulmonary embolism, just for prediction. Now this DVT we have to differentiate from other conditions, particularly causes for venous hypertension and venous claudication to be ruled out on history and on clinical examination. The other signs symptoms mimicking with this condition, we have to rule out the conditions like rupture of Mohren-Baker cyst, rupture of plantar tendon, thrombosed popliteal aneurysm, calf hematoma, cellulitis, superficial thrombophlebitis, arterial ischemia, then edema which may be due to cardiac or renal cause or due to anemia, hypoproteinemia, or any lymphatic obstruction or due to involved groin lymphatics, lymph nodes due to malignancy. So we have to rule out all these conditions by undergoing the investigation. The differential diagnosis for pulmonary embolism like acute MI, myocardial infarction, aortic dissection, pleurisy, pneumonia, that should be ruled out. Now, according to risk factors involved, we can group the patients which are prone for venous thromboembolism into 3 groups, like low group, in moderate group, and severe group. In low risk group, which includes minor surgery carried for less than 30 minutes with no risk factor, Major surgery which is carried more than for more than 30 minutes. Age is less than 40 years with no risk factor. Minor trauma, medical illnesses. Then risk factor in moderate group, major surgery, age more than 40 years with comorbid conditions, risk factors, major medical illnesses, major trauma, burn, minor surgery, trauma, medical illness, and added previous history of DVT, pulmonary embolism, or thrombophilia. Then in high risk group, which includes major orthopedic surgery, abdominal or pelvic surgery, major trauma, cancer surgery, major surgery, trauma, medical illness in patient with DVT or pulmonary embolism or with history of hemophilia, lower limb paralysis, bedridden patient for prolonged period, major lower limb amputations. So these are all carrying high risk. So they are grouped into high risk. Now investigations, the first routine hemogram, then platelet count, then most important is a coagulation profile PT-INR that should be done. The D-dimer test can be done. These are predictive if the value is more than 1.3 microgram per ml. Now negative value of D-dimer test is more important. So negative carries more value. Then this FDP analysis, fibrin degradation product that can be assessed. It assesses the plasma activity of fibrin. Then venous Doppler duplex scan that can be used routinely in our setup, which can detect the venous thrombosis in deep vein, extent of the thrombus. Then ascending venography, that is invasive technique, impedance plethysmography that is not used nowadays. So these are the invasive techniques. The more useful investigations like magnetic resonance venogram or CT angiogram, particularly pulmonary angiogram, is done for pulmonary embolism. The newer techniques like radioactive iodine I-125 labeled fibrinogen is injected IV in a dose of 100 millicurie. Prior to that, we have to give sodium iodide orally before 24 hours to block the thyroid activity. And in this study, radioactivity of heart at precordium is measured as a 100% value, and then counting in the leg is done after elevating the leg. If it is the radioactivity is more than 20%, if there is a more than 20% rise, then it is suggestive of DVT. So these are the recent radioactive studies which are helpful. Now this studies CT angiogram, MR and venogram or pulmonary angiogram can be done if we are going for any intervention or surgical interventions. So they are more helpful to assess the extent of embolism. Now how to treat this deep vein thrombosis? The basic treatment in the form of raise to the part, elevation and bandaging of the limb is most important. Rest, if we give the rest, then it will prevent the dislodging of the thrombosis. Elevation will improve the venous return and prevent the edema. Compression bandage is used so that the thrombus will not propagate or progress proximally. So this simple treatment must be started. The treatment is aimed at reducing the chances of pulmonary embolism and complications of DVT. So we need to go for rapid anticoagulation That can be done with IV unfractioned heparin. If the even in deranged renal function, if the renal function is not impaired, then we can use low molecular weight heparin, which can be given subcutaneous. That is the drug of choice, because it can be given subcutaneous once daily dose. No monitoring is required, which is required in case of heparin, unfractioned heparin. There is a low risk of bleeding compared to heparin, and there is no thrombocytopenia. So low molecular weight heparin is preferred drug of choice, but it requires monitoring of renal function. If there is a renal impairment, then the other newer drugs like fondaparinux and bivalirudin can be used. The fondaparinux is a factor 10 inhibitor, while bivalirudin is thrombin inhibitor. Then this treatment should be followed by oral anticoagulation as early as possible, particularly after 7 to 10 days. The oral anticoagulant, they are derived from coumarin derivatives like dicumaron, commonly used drug, that is warfarin, once in a day. It can be used for 3 to 6 months. The newer oral anticoagulants are available, for example, rivaroxaban, apixaban, dabigatran. These are the newer drugs, oral anticoagulant available with us. So rapid anticoagulation should be achieved as early as possible. This heparin can be given for 7 to 10 days, and then it is followed by oral anticoagulation as soon as possible. If the thrombus is fixed one, then we have to start heparin in higher doses like 25,000 units per day. It is to be given for 7 to 10 days. The APPT assessment should be done regularly when the patient is on heparin, and then we can continue the treatment with oral warfarin 10 milligram for initial 2 days, followed by 5 milligram daily. We have to maintain the INR between 2 to 3. So this warfarin should be continued for 3 to 6 months. For free thrombus, fibrinolysis should be done by streptokinase 6000 units, followed by 1000 units per hour. Then or urokinase 1,20,000 units initially, and then it is raised to 2,50,000 units per hour. Then another drug, that is tissue plasminogen activator TPA, that can be directly injected in the arteries to dissolve the thrombus. Now this anticoagulation is not without risk of bleeding. So bleeding tendency is more with this anticoagulation. So close monitoring of PT-INR and coagulation profile is must while using this heparin or low molecular weight heparin, or while going for fibrinolysis. Then interventional methods like venous thrombectomy, removal of thrombus from the vein by open method or by Fogarty's balloon. If the venous thrombus is progressive and there are chances of embolism, then one can go with the venous thrombectomy by using Fogarty balloon. Then if there is a high risk of bleeding tendency, then we can use IVC filter. So we can use Greenfield filter or Movin within umbrella that can be installed in the IVC to prevent the thrombus being dislodged or becoming embolus. So there can be temporary retrievable filters available, which can be used during a risk period when there are high chances of embolism. And once the thrombolysis is done, Then we can retrieve this IVC filter. So this can be, we can use temporary retrievable filters in case of high bleeding risk. In case of established or stable non-progressive thrombus, we can go with venous bypass, that is known as Palma procedure or May-Usni procedure. The venous bypass graft, autograft or Dacron graft, synthetic graft can be used to bypass the thrombus. So these are the interventional methods. So initially we should try with the thrombolysis medically. If there is a risk or if it is not possible to treat completely, then we can go with the interventional methods. Now 60% of cases within 5 years who develops DVT, they are at risk of developing this post-thrombotic syndrome. So they will develop this post-thrombosis limb syndrome, which can lead to venous hypertension, venous insufficiency. Now these PTS can be treated by recanalization of through the thrombosis. So venous recanalization can be done mechanically with the devices, and we can use a stenting to prevent the blocking of the thrombus. So venous recanalization, stenting, or already discussed, that is the bypass procedures. So these PTS can be treated with these methods. Then endovenous thrombectomy, stenting and thrombolysis, or we can directly inject the TPA, tissue plasminogen activator, directly into the thrombus. We have to weigh the risk of bleeding. So bleeding should be, risk of bleeding must be minimized while going for these procedures. The most serious complication of DVT, that is the pulmonary embolism. The treatment of this pulmonary embolism is anticoagulation, which we have described with the drugs, and then observe the patient, go for thrombolysis. If the facility is available, we can go with the catheter embolectomy under the radiology guidance. The most important is the prevention of pulmonary embolism. For that, the prevention of DVT is equally important. So prevention is better than treating the pulmonary embolism. Now, how to prevent the deep vein thrombosis? That is the most important aspect of this chapter. Now, we should categorize the patients in low risk, moderate and high risk. Then proper positioning of lower limb, elevation, massage. Then early ambulation, patient should be ambulated as early as possible. There is a role of physiotherapy. Physiotherapist should start physiotherapy as early as possible with ambulation of patient. Then also use of electrical nerve stimulator. If patient is asked to quit smoking, if patient is on OCP, then it should be stopped. Any hormonal treatment like estrogen should be stopped. So this prevention of DVT, that is the collective job of surgeon, physician, nursing and physiotherapist. So general measurement is important. Similarly, we can go with the mechanical prophylaxis for DVT to prevent the thrombus in calf. So post-operative pressure bandages, we can use graduated elastic compression stockings or bandages. Then we can use external pneumatic compressions, the devices which are available with us. Electric nerve stimulator, which mostly used by physiotherapists. So that is the mechanical prophylaxis, which can be used for mild to moderate risk patients. But mind well, this mechanical compression is contraindicated in presence of peripheral vascular disease, particularly in ischemic limb. So that caution must be borne in mind while going for mechanical prophylaxis. So pharmacological prophylaxis is used as anticoagulation for patients with moderate and high risk. So we can go with a low dose unfractioned heparin 5000 units prior to surgery. So this with heparin there is an increased risk of bleeding. So monitoring of prothrombin time, monitoring of patient is more important. Alternatively, we can go with low molecular weight heparin, where the risk of bleeding is low, no monitoring is required, but only thing the renal function should be normal. So for high risk group, we can go with the combination of prophylaxis, either a mechanical or pharmacological, along with the general measures. Similarly, the dextran 70 IV infusion 500 ml can be given intraoperatively, followed by 500 ml postoperatively in 24 hours. So this is how to prevent the DVT, chances of DVT by means of pharmacological prophylaxis. So in short, we must prevent the venous thromboembolism at any cost. We should prevent the chances of DVT and pulmonary embolism. So for that, regular monitoring of patient properly post-operatively, examining his calf for tenderness or any development of signs of DVT. If suspicious of DVT, then go for investigation. So this is how we should diagnose the DVT or thromboembolism as at earliest stage, so that we can treat it earlier to prevent the further complications. So thank you very much for patient listening.